Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this March 24th, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You can listen to my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can get replays at my website at ArcticBeacon.com. That's ArcticBeacon.com, as well as Liberty Radio Live. And we're on about 3 AM stations across the South, as well as shortwave on selected shows. Now, if ever in my days on this earth of witnessing a constitutional violations that take away the property, take away children, take away the rights of a group of individuals, it's the Tony Alamo ministry. And I've covered this case for years. And in the since last July, I've been doing an in-depth look at every aspect of the case that I find. And every time I feel like I found it all, something else pops up. And more egregious rights are violated of the American people. But one of the things behind this case that makes it interesting is the people that have been, I believe, persecuted in this case for their beliefs have really stood steadfast in their rights as American citizens, trying to fight what is an incredible beast out there who basically put a minister in jail for false charges. And one of the things about this I found was that they charged, if you look back at this is the second part of maybe a 3 or 4 part series. And yesterday I looked at the raid and through the eyes of someone that went through it. Very startling stuff. Go back to my show yesterday. That's Monday, March 23rd. And then I talked about the charges that were leveled against Tony Alamo. Now, this has been a systematic harassment of over 40 years of this Christian ministry. And I've documented that through the eyes of FBI informants who turned on the FBI when they felt that they were doing something so wrong. In this case, a couple of them came forward and said they could not find anything, but they were instructed by their superiors to bring this ministry down. Now, I've told you behind the scenes, there's a lot of things you could look at. But if you don't understand the story behind the Vatican, then it all falls on deaf ears. So go back to some of my shows. I lived in Rome for 7 years and firsthand saw the criminality behind that organization. Grew up a Catholic. So I was quite interested in what the hierarchy of my faith is all about, which 99% of Catholics don't really care. And what I found is that when I came back to America, there were very few people, Tony Alamo being one, who understood what they were all about, and he tried to tell people in a huge way. And for that reason, this is what this is all about. And in the meantime, a lot of these people have basically wanted to get the truth out to the American people and wanted to, secondly, worship their beliefs, under the protection, supposedly, of the Constitution of the United States, which gives this country freedom of religion. But in this case, you can see there isn't any if you don't toe the line that the Vatican has presented to the American people. And you know what? When you look at the ecumenical movement and the lukewarm Protestants out there, it's very evident that they have made a lot of headway over the last 200 and some years this country's been in existence. And there will come a day when there is no freedom of religion or speech, and we're very close to that today. Oh, we have a semblance of it. We have the right to a redress of grievances, but our grievances are never redressed. So I looked yesterday at the raid from the eyes of someone who went through it, and it was appalling. Go back to that show. Then I looked at the charges leveled against Tony Alamo, and we've done numerous shows on basically the framing of Tony Alamo in the last straw here, what they've done is over the years they tried to get him on it years ago on a child abuse charge that didn't hold, that didn't stick. Then they put him away for bogus IRS charges, which is for 4 years. Which, if you look at that case, he was set up and framed. And then finally, when he didn't stop preaching and talking about the Vatican, they had to come up with something else. And so they coerced witnesses. They basically took witnesses under promised them gifts. And to this day, some of them have recanted. But Tony sits in jail for 175 years. And I've went over that case with a fine-tooth comb, but still have more to do. And I will do more shows on his criminal case, which lasted 10 days in this, what I call worse than a kangaroo court in Arkansas. Many of the witnesses that would have helped to exonerate him were never allowed to testify. The defense he received in the beginning was appalling, almost to the point where I thought the defense was working with the prosecution, looking at it as a third party. And I'm looking at it, as a former law student. I have a bit of a knowledge about the law. And one thing I learned is, in this case, there's no such thing as a fair trial. This was a setup from day one. He was not only convicted in 10 days without a fair trial, I believe. All his appeals have gone on deaf ears. And the media was basically working together to convict him in the eyes of the public, which, in this case, when you look at what happened, and he had ministries all over. He had several of them that were very successful in different parts of the country. And when they leveled, when they did their SWAT team raid, where over 100 masked, machine gun armed agents came into this ministry and found, he wasn't even there, and they knew that. They had to know that. He was at a conference or giving a speech somewhere in California or Arizona. And the point I'm trying to make is, when they raided that, they took 6 children into custody there. Then the judge the next day put out an APB to round up all the rest of the Alamo children. And the point is, one thing that always I wondered about this, they took them into custody. To this day, most of them haven't been returned to their parents, despite numerous lawsuits, federal lawsuits and cases against the Arkansas Department of Human Services. And to this day, many of the parents have not seen their children. But the point is, they took them away without even giving Tony isn't he innocent till proven guilty, but they still have the right to take these children and never give them back? If he was the main reason they wanted to stop this, he's in jail. Is he a threat? No. I believe he's in jail for the wrong reasons, but look at it practically. If that was the threat, where is it now? And why aren't these children back reading the Bible, living with their parents in a ministry that was far better than the life they got when they went out? You heard what the woman said yesterday about some of these children that never came back and were put into state custody in the foster homes? Many of them got on drugs. They were pregnant. They've led a life that their parents never wanted for them. But I guess the state knows better, right? So what I'm getting at is, it always interested me that the state has the right to do this. I mean, if you look at the laws if you look at human services all over the country, for example, I knew somebody that came to me to report their story. They had children, and they lived next to somebody that was crazy, more or less, and basically wanted to get even with them for something, some trivial thing that happened between neighbors. So they called the Department of Human Services, I believe this was in Illinois, and made up some lies that they were abusing their children. Well, they came and their children were taken away. And when they said, well, who complained, they have no right to even know who was their accuser. And it took them 3 months to sort this out. It's a travesty. And this is why I said the state needs to stay out of these things. It has grown into a beast that will take away everything you have, including your children. Now, I'll save for another day the criminal case that I was talking about against Tony Alamo. Yes, I will. I'll save that for another day. And basically want to look at something here. The criminal case, there's still things I want to talk about in his case, in his trial. I mean, and there's certain, I mean, most every appeal has been exhausted and failed so far. But behind the scenes, I wanted to talk, besides the criminal complaint and what they did against him, then they went after the children and then the property. So I'll leave the property for another show and talk about a lawsuit that was filed, which kind of explains a lot about this ministry, and you'll see a side that you don't hear from the media. And this was filed basically by the ministries itself, several individuals involved in the ministry, Albert Ralph Krantz, Gregory Scott Ciego, and others involved against John M. Seelig, director of the Arkansas Department of Human Services, in his individual and official capacity, Steve Mason, administrator of the Arkansas Department of Human Services, and Gwen Lovelace, administrator of the Arkansas Department of Human Services with Fort Smith. Now, this complaint was filed, and in the complaint, it's a constitutional complaint, and it really lays this out so you'll understand a little bit. It's 106 pages long, and I wanted to bring this up because it talks a lot about the children being taken away unconstitutionally, the ministry being attacked unconstitutionally. And I believe, in my day of reading a constitutional case, I've never in my life seen more violations that have gone without a redress of grievances, showing you that the Constitution in this country absolutely means nothing. And if it meant something, these people would have their children back. This ministry would be functioning under the laws of the country, which state that you have the right to worship in the manner which you choose. There's no clause in it that says, but you can't criticize the Pope and the Vatican and show their atrocities that they've committed over the centuries, including what they're doing now. Nothing says that. And if you look at it, look at all of the abuses around the world. Just gather them up and put them in a big basket. The basket would be the size of the state of Vermont. When you talk about the child abuse charges, all of the horrendous things that have gone on over the years with this, the Vatican organization. I mean, when you look at what they've done in the mission schools in Canada and what they've done in the mission schools with the Native Americans, and then you fast forward it to all of these abuses around the world, even what goes on behind the closed walls of monasteries, and it's incredible. And I'm not talking about paddling somebody or spanking somebody on the butt. I'm talking about actual murder that doesn't get investigated. And there has not been. They don't shut down They don't round up all the Catholic children, put them in Department of Human Services foster care custody. If they had to do that, there wouldn't be enough homes to put these kids in. That's how bad it is in the Vatican and what's going on around the world with their organization. But it's quietly covered up. And then what they do is they find a ministry like this, a Bible-believing ministry, just like they persecuted Bible believers back in the Reformation period, which many Americans don't even know what it is. And pretty soon, in 100 years, they'll have wiped everything off of the history books. And that's their goal. That's why they call the Jesuits the great educators, because they're great at rewriting history. Now, in this case, I wanted to center on this because it explains, and I'm going to try the best I can in an hour to give you the main points of this 106-page document And if I miss some things, I'll try to go over them in other shows. But to give you an idea, this is a complaint that explains a lot of the constitutional violations. And, of course, it went on deaf ears. Now, the plaintiffs, in this case, the ministry, Krantz, Ciego, and others, sue defendants jointly, severally, and individually in both their individual and official capacities. And they seek an injunction or declaratory judgment that the policies and practices of the defendants are unconstitutional, void, and unenforceable. They're going to support this with factual allegations. And in this, folks, you're going to see the violations that, I believe the judges don't even bother reading. What they do is they give it to their clerk, and then they've already made up their mind what they're going to do, and they're just looking for ways. And they probably, and I've worked in law firms, the clerk is going to go. And this is supposed to be, this is not a plaintiff or a defendant here in a civil case seeking to figure out an argument for their client. They're probably telling their clerk, now the judge is supposed to be non-biased, find a way that these guys can't win and give it to me by 4 o'clock. Now, the plaintiffs, they're going to give you a lot of factual allegations. And in these allegations, you're going to see a lot about this ministry, what they did, the enormous amount of work they put in to getting their alerting people of what's going on, as well as standing steadfast in their Bible beliefs. So, let's just look at the nature of the case so you get an idea of this. In the plaintiffs, they're seeking redress against the defendants for a systematic, persistent, and continuous campaign of harassment and intimidation against the church, its members, its staff, ministers, ministries, and the families of members to damage and diminish the functions, activities, and purposes of the church. The policies and practices instituted and implemented by the defendants in this case, they're trying to show what they've done. And it's amazing when you begin to look at this, what you see. Now, this has gone, like in my shows, I've showed you how this has gone on for over 40 years, this harassment. And they say that, listen, and this kind of synthesizes it all, that the constitutional rights, and this is why I say that does it really exist in this country? If a judge can't sit there and go, something, they have a point. The constitutional rights violated by the policies and practices of the defendants include, but are not limited to, the right to be free of unreasonable seizures, the fundamental right to family integrity, autonomy, privacy, and choice, the right of religious choice, expression and association, the right of free association and privacy, and both procedural and substantive due process rights. Now, this is a suit pursuant to 42 U.S.C. 1983. They're seeking a declaratory judgment, which means that they want this action stopped immediately, and they want to be returned. They want their ministry returned to the way it was before this raid. And they want to do this because the plaintiffs have First, Fourth, Fifth, 14th Amendment rights, supposedly guaranteed by our Constitution. Now, when you're in law school, you study all this stuff. And you know what these amendments mean. And you know that in this case, you might as well not even have them on the books. Now, then it gets into a jurisdiction and venue, showing that the court has jurisdiction to decide on this matter. And we'll leave that, all that legal mumbo jumbo, so that we can get to the heart of some of the cases here, some of their allegations. And it also explains what this church is, or what the Alamo ministry is, and you might want to hear some of that. The church is an organized, non-for-profit Christian church that operates many ministries in many locations. But the central office is in Falk, Arkansas. And in the complaint, the church asserts its own rights, the rights of its faculty and staff, and the rights of its students, members, and ministers and their families. The church is a duly qualified corporation existing under the laws of Arkansas. Now, the church has third-party and representative standing to assert the rights of its students, members, ministers, staff, and families because it has been and continues to be injured. In fact, as a result of the unconstitutional acts, policies, and practices of the defendants. And I can show you they've been, and I've watched this ministry from, for years now, and I've seen what is being done to them, and it's a travesty. How would you like somebody to come in one day because you decided that you found out information that showed what we show on this show about the Vatican's involvement in government, about all their horrendous acts, and then you tried to tell that to people, and all of a sudden somebody came in your door and took your children, then decided to never give them back, and then decided to take your house and basically sell it for pennies on the dollar, and then leave you in the street. And the reason is because they're going to give you some bogus reason, but it's really because of your outspokenness against the Vatican and its huge, huge connections to our government, which are leading us into a real pickle right now when you talk about the war on terror, which has been orchestrated. And so that's why this case is important, and that's why you should listen to it. And you're probably thinking, well, it could never happen to me. I guess if you go to the Catholic Church and you just sit there and kneel and listen and take all that garbage in, or you go to a Protestant church that states this, that we are now friends with the Vatican, they've changed their ways. Oh, I guess you'll be okay. But you're going to live a lie. That's not what's going on. They haven't changed since the days of the Reformation and the Crusades. It's the same organization. They just have different tactics and different ways of reaching the same end. Remember, the ends justify the means. Their means have changed, but the end goal is the same, and they haven't changed. And if you want to know, just read they've never denounced anything they've done in the past. And in fact, I read to you an article the other day that John Paul blamed the children of the church for the Holocaust, not the Vatican hierarchy. He blamed the children of the church for all these things back into the Reformation and the Crusades. Yeah, or the Crusades they had to protect. But it's an incredible story, one that I believe is the biggest story never told. In this church, this Bible-believing ministry is the brunt of it. And one of the reasons, when you start reading this complaint, you'll see the enormous amount of effort they put into getting this message across. Unprecedented. I mean, the reformers would have been very proud of these people. And that's one reason why they've had 40 years of persecution and attack from a supposed free society like ours, which is completely false. And if what I'm saying isn't true, then this would have never happened. And so if you want to believe your government, if you want to believe the media on this case, go right ahead. I want to talk more about it in the next half hour on the Investigative Journal. Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal for the second half hour on this March 24th, 2015 day in our calendar. I'm into the second day of a 3 to 4 part series. It may even go all week if I keep finding more things out like I'm finding in these constitutional violations as I piece through this huge case of the state coming down hard on the Tony Alamo ministry since 2008. After 40 years of persecution for what I believe to be its belief system regarding the Vatican, just as the people during the Reformation, back during the time of Martin Luther, when he began a movement to say, listen, there's something going on here. We must have the right to worship God by reading the Bible, and we don't need the third-party traditions of the Vatican. And the Vatican has an idea, if you read their canon laws, that anybody that feels like this can be killed, persecuted, and it's justified. And apparently it is. In the old days, they just used to cut your head off or burn you at the stake. Now they put you through these the legal jungle, which is probably a slow death. And I'm watching that happen to these people that have been persecuted in the Alamo ministry. Now, you might want to know a little bit about it. And basically, a little bit about the church. And the church basically has been in existence for approximately 40 years or more. And it was founded by Tony Alamo and his wife Susan in the mid-60s, when he and his wife would go into the streets of Hollywood in West Hollywood, California, to tell people on the street the good news of the eternal salvation by faith in Jesus Christ. They would then feed the homeless and anyone who requested food. And from these humble beginnings, the church began to attract thousands of people. Oh, and the Vatican does not like that. Because, they want to market on this idea. They want to make sure, still to this day, they can't stop the Bible from being read. They can change it like they've done with many of their different editions. But they can't stop it. And you can thank Gutenberg and the press for that. Because prior to that, they could. So they would just basically not allow you to read it. So now they allow you to read it, but they figured, the best way to do this is to infiltrate and to kind of change doctrine subtly and control you that way. And that's exactly what they do, but the Alamo ministry wouldn't do it. And that's what's happened here. And I've seen other Christian ministries that follow the same path. They might not have been as large, they might not have reached as many people, but they have been persecuted as well. But the Vatican will look for the biggest so that they can basically control the masses. Now, the church operated during this time at 4 primary locations, one in Canyon Country, one in New York, one in Fort Smith, and one in Falk, Arkansas. Now, each church operated a full-time school dedicated to the education of children and church members in grades K through 12. Church continued to advance their education through college for qualified students, paying for them. School operated by the church was staffed and church members trained to use and teach the Abeka curriculum. Now, what is that? Now, the Abeka is a widely accredited and certified educational curriculum in the United States and in the world. The curriculum has been accredited by the Commission on International and Trans-Regional Accreditation, CETA, is most rapidly growing accrediting agency in the world. It was originated in 1994 by the regional accrediting organizations in the United States. Now, I would like to add that during this whole thing, I looked when they take away these kids from the Alamo ministry. Tony's in jail, of course, and he's fighting for his life. And they said, these kids have been abused. And when they couldn't find any abuse charges, what the state did was said, they're being homeschooled. That's not good enough. You got to be in public school, which is ridiculous. And then they went on and said, many people don't believe in vaccinations. Well, I'm going to tell you something. I believe a parent has the right to not allow their children to have, tainted needles put into their arm. And some of these vaccinations, I'm telling you, are killers. Just read up on it. Now, so here they are. Abeka, the school curriculum and system of teaching and learning, is also accredited by the Florida Association of Christian Colleges and Schools. Curriculum is widely accepted as a valid homeschool method in every state in the United States, but apparently Arkansas was looking for anything they could to get these kids away. Now, they operate a full-time prison Christian ministry whereby boxes of necessities, money, you might not have known this about them, Christian literature and Bibles, Christmas and birthday presents for the inmates, children, clothes, and transportation are furnished to inmates incarcerated in various prisons in the United States. So while the Vatican basically comes out publicly and states, oh, we love you, but they're putting their policies, and their government policies are incarcerating people by the dozens that are innocent, that shouldn't be in jail. This ministry decided to help those people. Big difference. Vatican doesn't like that. Christian literature and Bibles. They were giving Christmas, and they still do, Christmas and birthday presents for the inmates. Children, clothes, and transportation to furnished inmates incarcerated in various prisons in the United States. In the last 2 years, and this is back when this was filed, the church filled 8,000 requests from inmates at a cost of approximately $11,180 each month. Church filled approximately 260 inmate requests each and every month for the years 2005, 2006, 2007, and 2008. They also operate a full-time food ministry at every location of its satellite churches in the United States. The church operated full-time cafeterias at all their United States locations. They feed people every church service and 3 times a day, every day, for all who request food free of charge. From January to the raid in September 8, 2008, the church spent $403,200 in food costs. Church serves an average of 201,600 meals a year. And since the raid, the food expense has decreased to a mere $97,812. Yeah, see, you know what? I'm glad you can hear some of the things they do. In addition, the church gives away a significant amount of clothing, cleaning supplies, shoes, blankets, eyeglasses, dental care, and other medical needs paid to people who need these necessities. This is also given free of charge. For the year 2008, the church expended $516,594 to fulfill these needs. This is all in a lawsuit, folks, all public record. The church conducts, but you're not going to hear this side of the story in the media. Church conducts a Christian worship service at all locations every day, and 2 or 3 on Sunday. Church spends approximately $120,000 to $150,000 per month on utilities alone. The church prints, publishes, and distributes to at least 72 countries Christian literature upon request. These tracts and newsletters and pamphlets are translated in over 20 languages. The church purchases between 4 to 6 tractor-trailer loads of paper each month in support of this print ministry. The translation costs alone were $15,570. The church maintains a round-the-clock ministry telephone line for requests. The Christian programs and preaching ministries of the church are publicly broadcast by radio stations in the United States, Los Angeles, Vegas, Phoenix, New Orleans, Dallas, Little Rock, Knoxville, Memphis, Tennessee, Chicago, Atlanta, Georgia, Orlando, Detroit, New York, Lynchburg, Roanoke, and other places. So now you can understand, folks, why the Vatican wanted to put these guys out of business. They're spending all this literature, and a lot of it talks about the truth about the Antichrist and the Vatican, and a lot of their dealings in our government and in affairs of the world governments, which are incredible. In New York, church teams of distributors and our evangelists distribute Christian literature in New York and Witness for Christ. Over 1.5 million pieces of Christian literature is distributed by the church in New York each year. In Los Angeles, California teams of evangelists distribute Christian literature and witness to people. Over 12 million pieces of literature are distributed each year in Los Angeles alone. Now you can get an idea of why the Vatican had to come down hard, why the media has depicted these people as a cult, which they're not. I mean, give me a break. When you want to read the word cult, look at what just look at the biggest one in the world. I mean, I could think of two, the Vatican and Mormonism. That's allowed, though, isn't it? Oh, yeah, because they toe the line. Each weekend, one or two teams of evangelists from Fort Smith and Texarkana, Arkansas, traveled to different areas of the United States and distributed an average of 60,000 to 90,000 pieces of Christian literature per team per trip on the streets and witnessed to people about the good news of Christ. And much of this literature is Bible oriented, which means it cuts out the fact that you have to go to the priest or the pope or to some idol worshiping statue of Mary to get to heaven. And the Vatican doesn't like this because if most people do that, then there's no need for them, right? They lose a lot of cash. Now, the church is structured and functions according to New Testament biblical commands found in the New Testament books of Acts, especially chapter 2, 4, 5 of that book. Thus, the church is communal in nature. All assets and property is shared in one common pool by church members and administered by the church. The church, in turn, supplies its members with the basic necessities of life, which I might add, when you listen to the amount of poor people in America now, many people don't have. Life, shelter, clothing, food, education, medical bills, transportation, and so forth. The reason for this material financial arrangement is twofold. First, the church and its members hold a sincere belief and conviction that the Word of God commands them to live in this manner. Secondly, the church and its members spend the hours of each day in prayer, Bible study, witnessing for Christ, and attending worship services. The members believe that this, too, is a commandment of God as revealed in the Bible. The members of the church believe that to disobey any biblical commandment will cause them to lose their eternal salvation and thus jeopardize their souls to everlasting punishment. Now, the last time I checked, we do still have on books freedom of religion and belief systems, and yeah, that's evident. We're allowing how many other religions? We allow everybody here, right? You can be an atheist, a Muslim, you can be Protestant, you can be a Jew, you can be whatever you want in America, but you cannot be a Bible-believing Christian if you criticize the Vatican. That's true. That is something that's not on the books. It's an unwritten law, though, in this country. Now, what's the ultimate goal of the church, and what was the ultimate reason the Vatican wanted them gone outside of the criticism they leveled about them? Is to proclaim and preach and publish to the world the biblical message of Christian salvation. Now, I've said it many times that there's not one group of people in this world that are going to believe on every little thing. There are always going to be different interpretations of the Bible. So let's just leave that portion out of it when we start going, well, this ministry said this about chapter 1, verse 7, and that one says this. Let's look at things in general here and where it all leads. And the real key here is to state salvation through grace, not through works, and not through idol worship. And I think they followed that. Now, all ministries and work of the church, furnishing of housing to members, the maintenance of the schools, the publications and tape ministry, the food ministry, the prison inmate ministry, the clothing and other ministry, the work of the members, the administration of the church finances and business practices are designed to accomplish the ultimate purpose of the church. The purpose is to preach the written word of God and to live a life of consecrated services daily. Strict obedience to biblical mandates, the member's entire life is spent in this worship of God. To meet the enormous demands of the many ministries, the church performs and supports a great many people are needed to work full-time in these ministries. And, I'm just kind of give you an overview of what this ministry is all about, which you never get when you read, stories that are on the internet or in the newspapers that came out that are working together with the people I'm talking about that is trying to put this ministry out of business. Now, the performance of all this stuff doesn't seem to violate any laws of the United States, does it? Except that one unwritten law that you better not talk against the Pope. The acts of witnessing, caring for the elderly, the sick, the dying, the prisoners, feeding the hungry, and clothing the naked, worshiping God on a daily basis, Bible study, praying are acts that have been historically recognized in the United States as legitimate acts flowing from sincere religious expression and conviction. And when I look at that, and I've talked to a lot of these people privately, to find out really what was going on. Many of them are always involved in doing good things for other people, making me feel a little guilty. All I do is talk about it. But these people were actually out there helping others. And one way, and I've always said this, to me, one of the most important things in life is understanding. And their effort to get out this word about the Vatican, to me is, as a journalist, one of the most important things in the world. I have to commend them. And I really hate to see them persecuted like this, but it's part of the territory when you decide to tell the truth about this organization and also to read the Bible in Revelations. I have a lot of friends that are, I would say, Bible scholars that tell me that, yes, they're right on when they talk about the Vatican being depicted as the Antichrist in Revelations. Now, the Vatican wants that out of the picture. They don't want to be, they've got so many other interpretations to confuse you that they don't want anybody pinning them. But, their symbols and signs tell you they are. They even tell you, but they kind of like change that as well. Even at the Super Bowl, they do it. They had the woman riding the beast right in front of you in the halftime show. And the church, now, back to the Alamo ministry, and I'm not going to be able to get through this huge document and get to some of the meaty issues, but I will do that in another show, perhaps. Well, I got going to do it tomorrow, then we'll continue on if we can't finish. But the church holds these articles and creed of faith sincerely and honestly, and merely wish to practice their religious preference in a manner they deem is required by their calling from God. Now, I've talked to a lot of people regarding Revelations and regarding the Bible, and those who don't want to side with the Antichrist have to tell Moose, come here. Moose sees something and wants to growl and bark, and I'm not going to let her. She's a cat outside. Moose, it's my little dog Moose. Come here. And what they do is they can't just kind of like say, well, let's not talk about the Vatican here but God said to tell the truth in everything. So, I really respect the people that aren't afraid to do that. Now, the church, they hold these things important. That's why they pass out literature. That's why they do this, because they view it as a way of bringing people into, and my point is this. I try to talk about this secularly a lot, and I say, listen to you, whether you have to understand to lead a better life on this planet what the Vatican's all about. They go a lot farther, and I respect them even more because they take this into a whole, they talk about the whole thing, the religious and the spiritual. Now, they say this: the bad faith, unconstitutional policies and practices that were leveled against them are identifiable from the pattern of acts performed by these subordinate employees throughout the years. Additional information and policies and memo orders of defendants are going to be shown in this case during the course of this case, and this is not, and some of this stuff is still not available to them when they're writing this because they're having a hard time getting a lot of these internal documents from these agencies, proving that many of these subordinate employees were managed, directed, and told to do this to this ministry against its constitutional rights. And the really legal basis here, and we should look at the legal basis of this case. And we got about, maybe 5 minutes here, 4 minutes. So we'll get into a lot of this tomorrow. Is that they used Arkansas law for the achievement of an improper purpose and applied the statute for reasons and purposes for which the statute was never intended. The use of this was basically a violation of their state and federal constitutional rights. They also state that they entered into a conspiracy, the defendants, by agreement with each other, including the federal government organizations and what have you, to deprive the church and its members, ministers, teachers, staff, and their families of equal protection of the laws and equal privileges and immunities under the laws, and committed one act in furtherance of the conspiracy. And like I talk about, I say there's a double standard going on. They did this to this ministry, but allow the Vatican to continue doing anything they want. Now, they say they were denied rights under the Free Establishment of Religion Clause. The First Amendment is herein, as we have written, and were therefore injured as a direct result of this conspiracy. And we're going to start tomorrow, because all of this is in violation. You can look it up, 42 U.S.C. 1985, Section 3. But on or about September, we're back to September 18th, 2008. And we're this final attempt through this conspiracy to bring this ministry down for the last 40 years was put into action with that raid that we talked about yesterday. So let's stop there on this document, continue with it tomorrow, because there's a lot of interesting things that they bring up that happened. And I've talked about that in the past. I brought in some testimony from parents who lost their children, what they've gone through over the years. Brought in testimony from some of the FBI agents who have told us basically that this has been a frame job from the beginning. And I asked one of the agents, what was the reason? Is it because of the Vatican criticism? And he said, yes, definitely. So, why don't we look into this side of the story? And why don't we look into it in general? When we look at ISIS, when we look at a lot of things, why don't we look at the connections here? Maybe we could get down to really what's going on and why we get no real support from our government officials, because they're playing a game with us. And that's what I wanted to do, to bring that to into your thought process, so that you might start looking into some of the, I always say go back to Lincoln, go back to Kennedy, go back and start really looking at what these people have done, the Vatican and their cohorts over the years, and you will see that there is a lot of probable cause behind what I say. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal. Thanks for listening.